Are you now talking back at me? Eh? Somebody have taught you how to open your foolish mouth and talk back at me. Once upon a time, in the heart of Olokoro village in Abia State, Nigeria, there lived a woman named Inosi. Her life began as a tale of love and dreams, but fate took an unexpected turn that would test her strength and resilience. Inosi, a woman of grace and beauty, was known throughout the village for her kindness and warm heart. She fell in love with a man named Nonso, who initially swept her off her feet with a promise of a bright future. They got married, and for a while their days were filled with laughter and the joyful sound of their children playing. However, as time passed, Inosi had added weight after giving birth to 4 children, and Nonso was no longer happy with her. The warmth of Nonso's love turned cold, and his laughter morphed into the cruel echoes of abuse. Inosi endured the cruelty for the sake of her children, praying that one day the storm would pass. Inosi found herself bound to Nonso, a man whose charm had once won her heart. However, as time unfolded, Nonso's true nature emerged. He became a cruel and domineering husband, using force on her and the children, and this left scar on Inosi's spirit. The village, blinded by tradition, turned a blind eye to the suffering within Inosi's household. Whispers of her endurance echoed through the thatched huts that the community hesitated to intervene. It was a silence that fueled Nonso's tyranny, and Inosi bore the brunt of his cruelty alone. Inosi's home, once a haven of love and warmth, had transformed into a house of shadow under Nonso's oppressive rule. Nonso's cruelty knew no bound, as he subjected Inosi and their children to both physical and emotional torment. The crack in their relationship began to surface early on in their marriage, with Nonso's temper flaring over trivial matters. A spilled pot of water or a delayed meal became an excuse for his wrath. Inosi bore the brunt of his anger, enduring harsh words and occasional physical abuse. Her children innocently witnessed the turmoil that their mother passed through, and they cowered in fear, and their laughter replaced by hushed sobs. Nonso's threats were like a storm that loomed overhead, ready to unleash its fury at any moment. He would taunt Inosi with the possibility of taking another wife, using it as a weapon to keep her in check. The mere mention of bringing a new woman into their home struck fear into Inosi's heart. It was a constant reminder of her vulnerability. He would even insult her while she was pregnant or when she was nursing their children, and this would make her cringe in fear. But the cruelest blow came in the form of Nonso's threats to separate her from her children. He would coldly declare that he had the power to tear the family apart and would take her children away from her, and she would no longer see her children. This would leave Inosi very, very unhappy. And these threats were calculated moves in order to break her spirit and force her to comply with his demands. Inosi, however, harbored a fierce love for her children that burned brighter than Nonso's attempts to extinguish it. As the threats intensified, so did her determination to shield her children from harm. She understood that silence would only perpetuate their suffering, and she yearned to break free from the chain that bound them. There were days Nonso would come home either drunk or very angry and would just insult Inosi and their children, calling her a fat, useless wife. He would go on saying, "I work all day, and you just sit at home doing nothing, bearing useless children and growing fat." Then he would go on to say again, "Your mates are helping their husband,
and you just sit here.
And when she tried to remind him that he was the one that said she should stay at home and take care of their children, he would flare up that she was talking back at him, and Ngozi will cower in fear, lest he injures her. This went on for years, and she tried to tell her mother about it, but her mother would say to her,
I did not leave my husband's house. Don't be the first to do that, Ngozi.
Then she would go on again and say,
or do you think you would bring shame to our family and return to your father's house? Never. Please, don't bring shame to our family name.
Ngozi did not know who to turn to. Nonso only gave her just enough to feed the entire family, and she couldn't even dress properly, neither could her children. Nonso would only dress her properly when he was going out on an occasion so that she would not disgrace him according to him. Ngozi yearned for something better for herself, so she gathered her strength as she could no longer endure the shackles of this oppression. Determined to break free from this chain that bound her to this man, she sought solace in the words of a village elder known as Mama Zara. Mama Zara was a wise old woman, and when Ngozi went to meet her, Mama Zara noticed the pain on Ngozi's face. With compassion in her eyes, Mama Zara spoke of courage, urging Ngozi to find her voice and herself, and to find other women who she could talk to and who would help her. It was time for her silence to break. Encouraged by Mama Zara's wisdom, Ngozi began to share her story with the women of the village. Slowly, the veil of silence lifted, revealing the shared pain of others who had suffered in silence. United by their stories, the women came together and formed a very strong bond and started helping each other. They contributed money and gave Ngozi to start a small business. At first, Ngozi did not know what business to do since her husband told her not to work. But Ngozi was not one to succumb easily. She yearned for a better life for herself and her children. And so, in the quiet of the night as the villagers slept, she honed her skills in secret. She discovered that she had a passion for making jewelries out of beads. And so, at night when everyone slept, she would learn the trade little by little, learn how to make beaded necklaces and jewelries, and she continued doing it and she was happy until she became very good at it. Eventually, she used the money that was given to her by this group of women to buy her business material and started a jewelry business. Ngozi began to sell her creation in a local market, quietly amassing a small fortune. The women of the village, inspired by her determination, rallied around her and bought beads from her and jewelries. They bought her goods and told other women to come and patronize her, and Ngozi became rich little by little. As Ngozi's business grew, so did her strength. She used her newfound independence to shield her children from the storm that raged within her home. She could clothe herself better and clothe her children better. They could eat more nutritious meals in the absence of her husband's money. Fateful day as Ngozi's success became widely known. Nonso, fueled by jealousy, sought to take everything she had built, and then he confronted her, demanding control over her business, her earning, and seeking to shatter the very foundation of her newfound freedom. But Ngozi was no longer the fragile flower he had once manipulated, and so she stood tall, her eyes reflecting the fire of 1,000 suns. In a voice that resonated with an unwavering strength, she declared,
I endured your cruelty, made my own money, and fought for my life and my children. You will not break me.
And Nonso reacted,
Are you now talking back at me? Eh? Somebody have taught you how to open your foolish mouth and talk back at me.
As he was shouting at Ngozi, the villagers gathered around and warned Nonso that they will banish him if he continues this cruelty and oppression. Then the villagers warned him to be very careful of his ways and should end what he was doing to his wife and his children. Nonso was very upset that his wife had gained so much confidence and could stand him up. So one day, Nonso, pretending to be drunk and hoping to deal with Ngozi, planned. Ngozi was in the kitchen cooking a pot of jollof rice for the family, and she was happily cooking it. Nonso came into the kitchen in a fit of anger and kicked the pot of food, hoping that it would spill on Ngozi and wound her. Ngozi was shocked, but she narrowly escaped it. The next morning, she was still in shock at what happened the previous day and could not believe that Nonso, her husband, could do that to her. Then it dawned on her that if she did not leave her husband's house, something worse might happen to her and her children. So she packed some of her belongings and that of her children and left her house to a friend's house. Nonso, being a very proud man, did not bother if she left with his kids and did not go looking for her. Instead, to show off, he took another woman named Adane. Things went on well between Adane and Nonso for a while. But Adane was only interested in Nonso's money, and she made him spend it all on her. Then Nonso became penniless, and his true color started to manifest. He started getting drunk out of frustration and wanted to start maltreating and domineering Adane just like he did his wife and children. But this time, Adane dealt with him. She was too strong for him to manipulate. She chose whatever she wanted to do and cooked whenever she liked. And this made Nonso very angry. Then Adane told him,
Do I look like your maid? Or do you think I am Ngozi, whom you treated harshly? You ungrateful man. Besides, I am not your wife. God gave you a beautiful wife and wonderful children, and you are so arrogant you can't see it, foolish man.
Adane then packed her things and left. Nonso felt that he could do without Adane and his wife and children, so he decided to go look for another woman in the village to come and help him cook and clean his house, as his house was in a mess. He was hungry, lonely, and needed help, so he went in search for other women. But no woman in the village wanted to have anything to do with him, and as he approached them, they all laughed at him. This made him so sad and broke his arrogance. For days, he could not clean his house, he could not cook a good meal because he couldn't cook and couldn't help himself, and no one could help him because of the way he treated his wife and children. Then Nonso started to lose weight because he couldn't eat properly. In silence alone with his thoughts, he scanned through his life. He realized that indeed he had been a very foolish man. He realized that he had married a good wife and she did everything to help him despite his cruelty. Then he decided to go look for Ngozi and beg for her forgiveness. In shame, he went looking for Ngozi and his children. When he found her, she was looking radiant, and his children walked away from him when they saw him coming. He was not happy that his children did not want to see him. Ngozi, on sighting Nonso, was very angry and said to him,
Nonso, what do you want?
Nonso was so ashamed of himself and said in a quiet voice,
I have come to plead with you to forgive me and please let's return home.
Then Ngozi replied,
Me, return. To where? Me, follow you to that hellhole. God forbid.
Nonso begged and begged, but Ngozi turned a deaf ears. Nonso then went to beg Ngozi's parents, and her father simply told him,
You drove my daughter out of your house. If she hadn't left, who knows, by now, you would have killed her, and we wouldn't be here talking. Look here, young man, will you get out of my house this minute?
Nonso was so confused and desperate, but in shame, he went to beg the village elder so that they will accompany him to beg Ngozi and her family. So the elders called a meeting between Nonso and Ngozi's parents and Ngozi. In the meeting, the elders begged Ngozi to return to her husband's house for the sake of harmony and their children. But this time, Ngozi said, in not so happy voice, gave her own terms that Nonso would never ever touch her if she was to return, and he will never abuse her or her children again, and she will do and cook whenever she liked and not at his own demand. And Nonso would help her in doing house chores, and that she was not his maid but his partner, Nonso, agreed to all her terms and thanked the elders and Ngozi parents. So, they all returned home in peace. As days went on and weeks, peace returned to their home. Nonso became a changed man and the family became happy. He stopped his horrible ways, and little by little, Ngozi helped him back his feet and gave him some money to go back to his business. Nonso then realized that God had truly blessed him with a wonderful wife and he could have lost her forever. The story of Ngozi echoed through the village and other neighboring villages. This became a testament to the strength that breaking silence when you suffer is indeed a wise decision. No one should ever endure such cruelty. And so, Ngozi's journey inspired others to stand against cruelty, and she transformed her home into a place where the power of unity triumphed over the darkness of oppression.